Welcome to the Small Business Briefing, and this is the home edition. Of course, this will look familiar to people because a lot of the last couple of years, actually, we were operating from home, but given that school's out, we were able to easily pivot to the old home-based office. You see, I found my daughter's artwork that I have on display for everybody to see. She'd kill me if I showed that, because the other painting of the city in the back, that's also her, more contemporary, but when she was a little kid, this is what she did. And that's the part that still kind of pulls at my heartstrings. But all the kids are home today because school's closed. And I think that is the same for my co-host, Sarah Miller.
It is indeed. I am balancing the work from home life with an 8-year-old. So luckily he's busy, I don't know, probably playing Minecraft or something, but I love the kid artwork. It's the absolute best. So we appreciate all of you who are joining us today. We are going to welcome our new member of the week on behalf of our sponsor, Marana Group. And this week we are welcoming a new elite member. And this is a newer membership category for SBAM, but the Seventh Legacy LLC company has joined as an elite member, and they are located in Traverse City. Seventh Legacy provides comprehensive consulting, business development, community and economic development services to Native American and minority-owned businesses. So a big welcome to Seventh Legacy. All right, we have quite a show today. First up, we're going to talk a little bit about the national debt. The national debt has hit $30 trillion. And that is kind of an incomprehensible amount of money. So Brian, what is this telling us about our current economic state?
You might recall, Sarah, that several months ago, we had taken a kind of unprecedented step of opposing a federal spending bill, which appropriations bills are things that SBAM hasn't traditionally gotten involved in. But given the fact that federal spending was so far beyond what it had ever been before, the deficit spending at levels that we had never seen before, it was contributing to a lot of challenges and instability and volatility out there in the market. And it's just kind of the general climate that businesses are operating in and contributing to inflation. That was kind of the kind of the lead up to this point. And it does seem like the idea of unbridled debt acquisition is finally kind of sinking in, that this is problematic. Hitting a milestone like $30 trillion, it's difficult to even wrap your mind around what that really means. But there are ramifications both for inflation, and then also interest rates is one of the tools that is used to manage inflation. And so there are, we've talked a lot about those mechanisms, those levers in inflation and the ramifications of it. So we don't need to rehash that, except to say that hitting a milestone like this can sometimes cause or capture people's attention. Say, okay, this is what we've done for the last couple of years, pandemic and a lot of uncertainty and erring on the side of overdoing it, the response to the pandemic. That may have made sense in that context before. Certainly in 2020, I think you have a strong argument that it did. 2021, it really seemed like it did more harm than good. A lot of the responses in overall federal spending, and then now we see kind of full bore the ramifications of that. So the fact that we hit this milestone, I think, will kind of reset what people consider to be too much debt. But even to put it in perspective, because $30 trillion, and sometimes I say like a trillion is 1,000 billions, and a billion is 1,000 millions, right? So you get an idea of how much this really is. It's an incredible amount. But if you were to break it down, it's about $90,000 per American. So for every person, there's five people in my household, the debt, if everybody kind of shared an equal portion, it would be $90,000 each. The net interest cost on the debt as it stands today is about $2,600 per household per year. So if we were to just cover the interest costs on that. And, the interest cost for the federal government is quite low, but it still would be just for my own, the interest cost for my own household would be, $12,000 or $13,000. So it's I'm sorry, about over 15, no, 12, yeah, about 13 or so thousand. But also what I think got more people's attention was that there was this projection of what to expect over the next few decades, and going out 3 decades, they're on current, again, assuming like no new pandemics that cause this type of extra spending, but in the normal trajectory of things, we would expect it to be to double 60 trillion by 2051. Now 2051 may seem like a long way out, 30 years out, but 30 years ago was 1992. So for those of us who have memories of the 1990s, it's not that far, not that long ago. It's and so that's really something. And it would be by 2051, it would take up nearly half of all federal revenues to pay the debt, to pay the interest on the debt. So it's not really sustainable at that level, and it makes me more confident that the Build Back Better plan, all the reasons that we opposed that and hoped that it would be set aside in favor of a more normal federal role in our lives and in spending. I think hitting this milestone actually builds the case and really puts credibility behind the opposition that senators like Senator Manchin from West Virginia, one of the Democrats in the Senate that had a problem with that overall spending, had pointed to, and kind of affirmation of that position. Like, yeah, we have to say when is enough.
Right. When you put it in those terms, 30 years really isn't that far into the future. And that is an extreme amount of money to continue to rack up there. We're going to talk about money again, but at a different level. Monday was the campaign finance reporting deadline here in Michigan. And this is one of the stories we were going to briefly touch on Monday's show. We ran out of time. So now that you've had some time to look at the reports, can you give us a little bit of information? Let's take it in a few buckets. Let's start first with just the parties in general. Is there a standout candidate that's emerging based on these finance reports?
Well, in the legislature, as you know, there's a big reshuffling happening right now. So all the lines have been redrawn. We talked about the legal actions and the court fights on that. SBAM does have a political action committee. We do vet candidates to determine how pro-small business they are, and then endorse those that are, and those that have strong records of being pro-small business. So this is something that's really part of our core mission in the work that we do. So as we look across the landscape, there's a lot of new districts, a lot of new candidates. And so we're still kind of sifting through it, literally hundreds of people that are running for office at various levels of state government. But in focusing in on those legislative candidates, those who are incumbents are definitely way out ahead. So the ones that have been in office, lines got redrawn. They kind of decided either they're running in their home district, or maybe there's some of them that are kind of moving around, changing residences to run. But those that have been in office have really built a pretty strong commanding type of position in the areas where they're running. In those open seats, though, what we're seeing is there are a lot of candidates that have filed. It will be a big undertaking. We'll do it, but there'll be a big undertaking of going through our questionnaires and review of positions, and in some cases interviews with candidates over the next several months. Filing deadline hasn't hit yet, so there could still be more. But at this point, in the open seats, it's not really very clear at all who has the upper hand in most areas. But in those areas, it's not going to be most districts, but in those areas that have an incumbent running, they look pretty well positioned. I can't think of a single incumbent that to me looks like they've got a hopeless type of a situation. So In those cases, we like it because we can look at actual records. People are running for office for the first time. We know what they say. What are they going to do in office? With the incumbents, we know whether or not they lived up to it. But it looks like on the campaign finance side that that they've been doing the work to get ready for their reelections, and whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, I think they'll be in most of the incumbents will be in pretty good shape. Where it will get kind of messy is where you have a Republican against a Republican in a primary, and a Democrat versus a Democrat in a primary over here, because the district lines got drawn differently. And those incumbent versus incumbent elections, which happen every 10 years when redistricting line results in new lines, those can be pretty brutal and complicated election cycles. But we'll be on top of that too and report to everybody. When we have favorite candidates, we don't make it a secret. The pro small business, we shout it from the hilltop, and those that have stood out in being pro small business on either side of the aisle.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about our PAC, which I think have shared before but we do put the candidates through an extensive vetting process, and they have to answer the questionnaires. They have to show us how they're voting on certain issues. So, we really do the homework so that our members know who they can trust and who is a pro small business candidate for office. All right, moving on. What about in the caucuses, Brian? What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so aside from the candidates have their own campaign finance reports and their own committees to elect, which is the way that they run their own campaigns. But also the House Republicans, the House Democrats, and the Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats have their kind of central committees that they use to kind of help out and target races. In this case, clearly the Republicans have a big advantage when it comes to money raised. So multiple, 2 to 3 to, or 2 to 1 about, especially in the House side. But there is where there's just a ton of open seats, so a money advantage when you have a bunch of seats that don't have incumbents running is more important. So I would, at this point, it's clearly the legislative Republicans have an advantage in their caucus fundraising. It's not particularly close. And that's not unusual, by the way. Over the last several cycles, it's been like that. So it doesn't, money doesn't make all the difference at the end of the day. But when you're trying to carry a message forward and trying to certain target seats and things are really close, and just kind of pushing that message out a little bit more at the end makes a difference. So the caucus that has more money tends, those elections that are kind of on the margins will be enough push at the end to put them over the edge. So, the Republican legislative leadership has to feel pretty good about where they're at. New lines, kind of an anything goes type of a situation, but the campaign finance reports, there's no subjectivity there. It's a very objective measure, and Republicans are way ahead.
All right, so now for the big race, the race for governor in 2022. How is that race shaping up based on the campaign finance reports, and just overall, how are things looking?
Well, if the Republicans have an advantage in the legislature, clearly Governor Whitmer, who is a Democrat, has an advantage money-wise in the general election. So she has proven to be a prolific fundraiser, and so has got over $10 million on hand, and that's after sending about $3 million to the Michigan Democratic Party, which was, you might recall it, hearing in the news there was some controversy over she had raised money over the limits for the potential of a recall election, which never materialized. And then so that money was not returned back to the donors. It was given to the Michigan Democratic Party. Even after that, she has $10 million left. If you look across the board, there are 12 or 13 now candidates for governor on the Republican side. There are 5 of them that I think that look to me where I'm confident they're going to make the ballot. They're going to collect the signatures. They're going to be there at the end of the day. 4 of those 5 have filed campaign finance reports. And then the fifth one is a brand new candidate and hasn't yet filed. We'll talk about him last, but on the ones who have filed, their fundraising next to Whitmer's is very, very small. The money advantage that the governor has is massive over the candidates that have filed so far and have filed campaign finance reports so far. But you do have a grassroots candidate, Garrett Soldano, who has qualified for the ballot. His signature still have to be verified, but did it on 100% volunteer basis. That's impressive. Normally, you have some volunteers, but you also have these kind of people that for a living, they collect signatures for candidates and go door to door and that sort of thing. He was able to get 22,000 signatures on a pure volunteer basis. That's unusual. It means that he's very well organized. On the money front, though, not even close to the same ballpark of where the governor is. There's a candidate, Tudor Dixon from the Muskegon area. Had, I think respectable fundraising over the entire year, but the fourth quarter was low, and expenditures exceeded the amount coming in. And so that's not, you don't want to be there at this point of the campaign. And then Kevin Rinke, who is a self-funder, had put in $2 million. And really that was all the money that he has. I think he raised $4,000 or $5,000, but spent maybe $500,000 of that. So does have seven figures in the bank. And then as also, maybe people have seen, he's got commercials on TV already. And then the final one, Perry Johnson, who is most recently on the scene. So brand new candidate, doesn't have a campaign finance report from before, but kind of came on the scene saying, okay, the governor raised $2.5 million in the last quarter. I'm going to put in $2.5 million to get it started and match dollar for dollar. He's a business person, basically a quality control expert in manufacturing and brand new on the scene. Not a person who's ever run for office before. Rumored that there'll be a Super Bowl ad that is kind of coming on the scene big at coming up real soon. So you have two candidates that are talking about putting millions in. So maybe could kind of ramp things up to compete with the amount of money that the governor has. And then the other candidates really have got to figure out a way, or else their message to get out there to raise money to be able to get their words and image and campaign themes up on TV and on the radio and internet and all the different types of paid media things that you have to do to run for office. Those candidates are in a race against the clock because this campaign is up and running.
You're right. Now is the time. And if you are placing your commercial on the Super Bowl, I think you mean business. So I'll be anxious to see how that goes. All right, let's talk a little bit about Michigan Reconnect. We're just kind of, I guess, celebrating the first anniversary of that initiative, which is an initiative that SBAM has supported. So can you remind our viewers what Reconnect is and share a little bit about how the first year has been?
Reconnect is a program to essentially cover tuition costs for adults to go back to community college or get another like post-high school certificate of some sort, including an associate's degree. And it's part of the governor's overall goal to have 60% of our population with a post-high school certificate for the workplace by 2030. It's something that SBAM was very early in adopting support of that effort. Has a lot to do with these, we talked over and over about workforce. We got shrinking labor force participation rate. We have a population that has been pretty flat. It's not shrinking as much like it was in the first decade of the century, but not growing like other places. An older population, we need to have high productivity out of the population that we have. And the idea of removing obstacles and barriers to furthering education and productivity capabilities of the workforce is something that we could get behind early. And because it's done through community college, it's a higher value. So the cost benefit analysis made a lot of sense to us as long as there's accountability. But you can put all the programs out there that you want. unless you're really hitting a need that people feel like that it creates an opportunity for them, it doesn't make that much of a difference. In this case, though, it has exceeded our expectations and what could possibly happen. When the governor called me in January or February of 2019 and said, "Hey, want to work on increasing the number of people that have post-high school work credentials and especially associate's degrees and starting in community college. Would SBAM be willing to kind of organize and coalesce the business community around that effort?" And so we got involved, and it was the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Detroit Chamber, the Michigan Chamber, Business Leaders for Michigan, and SBAM, who really worked on making the case, investigated what other states were doing, especially Tennessee, that had great progress in this area. And what we came to the conclusion, it makes a lot of sense. Here are the accountability measures we need to make sure we're getting value for the dollar. A year later, 91,000 people have participated. And it's so that many, and now we'll see how many make it through and actually finish with the credential at the end. But that far exceeds what I thought would have been a success. If I were here talking to you a year after it went through the process, passed by the legislature, money appropriated and out there in the field, if there were 50,000, I would have considered that to be a big success. There's over 90,000. So I think it has the opportunity to make a really big difference. And it's one of those win-win type situations where I think employers win because you have employees that are more outfitted with the types of skills that they're likely to need in the future. But also on the employee side, it gives them access to a new world of opportunities for growth in their careers. So across the board, I consider this to be in the sea of controversies out there to be one of the wins that we really all had together. Great bipartisan effort, Republican sponsors in the legislature, and then of course early support from the governor came together really well. And we're going to go ahead and mark this one down tentatively as a win. Now we got to see, people got to finish the programs, and it's only worth it if they follow through. But early indications are that they are, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around it moving forward.
I love it. It's great when we can all work together and celebrate a win like this. We will drop the link about Reconnect into the comments so you can learn more about it. All right, let's go back to election talk. And can you preview what ballot initiatives we might expect to see?
There are a bunch of ballot initiatives, some as like constitutional amendments, others as citizens initiatives, where people can put a law before the legislature, they pass it or not. And then if they pass it, it goes into effect without the governor's signature. So there are a lot of things that are in play. I wanted to cover some of them that I think are legit based on, again, campaign finance reports show that they have real money behind these proposals, which means they can do advertising, they can get the hundreds of thousands, really need about 500,000 signatures in order to get these things in play, which is pretty expensive to manage. There is a proposal. This is one that we've seen before, but on minimum wage and setting minimum wage at $15. Michigan already has a minimum wage that has an inflationary increase in it. The hope when that passed was that it would kind of put this issue to bed and we wouldn't have ballot initiatives on minimum wages anymore. But obviously that hope did not come to reality. There is one, and they filed a campaign finance report showing 1.35 million on hand, which means very likely they'll be able to qualify for the ballot, put that question up. By the way, when these citizens initiatives, it goes to the legislature. If they pass it, it becomes law. If they don't pass it, it goes to the ballot for people to accept or reject when you're voting for candidates. So just be on the ballot for everybody to vote on. There is also another one, like it's called like Unlock 2. Remember, there was Unlock Michigan, which was an initiative to eliminate the emergency powers of the Governor Act and leave just with the epidemic emergency powers. this next phase of that would limit those emergency powers to 28 days. So right now, epidemic emergency powers can go on. It's narrower in scope than the previous emergency powers that were eliminated before. But so in other words, it's limited to just the healthcare part of things. But there are many who would like to see that limited in time, even that power limited in time to 28 days. There are groups supporting and opposing that, and they both look pretty well funded. Then there's some election reforms that are up. There's one that was already in place that the Republicans were pursuing to change the way that elections work, and then there's a new one that Democrats are considering to kind of come over top of that. Republicans were going to do a citizen initiative, and then the more from the Democratic side of the aisle with interests that we're thinking of a constitutional amendment. So be a lot of action there. And then there's also a one called Let My Kids, Let Michigan Kids Learn. And that is one that would offer tax deductions for a myriad of different educational supports, which wouldn't be controversial, but including tuition to private schools, and which is, got a long controversial history in Michigan. So expect a pretty big fight on that one, but well-funded support and opposition behind that. So I expect that'll probably make it to a point of getting signatures, and then at that point, it'll be kind of enters into the political arena. There's another one on payday lending as well, but as you can, as you put limits on payday lending type of activities. So all of these things, like a bunch of things, so all these new districts and all these new candidates, all the other races at the top of the ticket with governor, secretary of state, attorney general, you have a couple of Supreme Court justices up, and we have all of these initiatives as well that I think have a chance of making it to the end too. So expect this to be a very, very loud election cycle.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And it sounds like that we'll all have a lot of research to do as well as we get closer to election time. All right, we have time for one last topic. We have talked a lot about labor force on the briefing. Our members are struggling. And there's lots of factors that are impacting the current and future workforce, including the birth rate. And now for the first time, there were more deaths than births in Michigan. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was it's one of those things where you could see it coming over the years, but when the year arrives, when it's like, wow, there were more people that died than were born in our state last year, it's kind of like a ton of bricks. It brings home all these other issues. And as we were talking about labor force shortages and the participation rate and population trends in our demographics in our state that are kind of working against us, this is the message that we keep on carrying forward. Like, there's all of these different issues, but policymakers, you really need to focus on this one in terms of how many people we have to run this place. Because it's the one thing that there's no reason to expect it's going to turn around anytime soon. It's not like, oh, the pandemic ends, it's going to get better. There is no reason to think that's the case. And this is just the latest data point. So we talked about the birth rate and the replacement rate of the population before. We've talked about the labor force participation rate kind of on a 20-year downward trend, and hasn't really fully recovered even from the beginning of the pandemic, which was already too low. And then on top of that, the numbers were 104,149 babies born in Michigan last year, and 117,087 that died. And so now you could definitely say, well, but you had the pandemic, and it's true. The pandemic definitely made this date come a little bit earlier, but it probably would have happened in the next few years anyway. And so it's just another one of those things, as we say, what are the things to get ready or to prepare for. Finding people is not going to get any easier. It's going to get more competitive. It's going to be more difficult. And And so it'll probably lead to a productivity revolution and automation and changing the way that everything is done because of these population trends. But in the meantime, this work that we're focused on in terms of ensuring the population that we do have is equipped and ready and able to reach maximum potential, that's one of the things that we can do now. A couple other short-term things we can do: H-2B visas for the hospitality industry. Is every talk that I give with people, I like long-term things and short-term things. Hospitality industry in Michigan right now really needs Washington to change their policies on H-2B visas, seasonal workers. Our tourism industry really depends on this, and some other industries too. But the tourism industry, a lot of places this spring, if this doesn't get worked out, they're not going to be ready to open this summer, or have to scale way back, and that means that people will have to vacation someplace else. And obviously, we don't want that. So a lot of things to think about. Another data point that reinforces our drumbeat to policymakers, that if there's anything that you need to really focus on as a top priority, it is that we do not have enough people, and it's going to get harder, not easier in the future.
All right, well, that about wraps up our show for today. Before we say goodbye, I want to let those of you who may have been planning to attend the Lansing area owner-to-owner event last night on February 2nd know that it has been rescheduled for March 16th. So you can check that out at sbam.org/events. And then we do have 2 other business owner meetings coming up. We'll be in Kentwood on February 9th. And we'll also be in Marquette on February 17th. So you can see all of our events at sbam.org/events. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Have a great week, everybody. See you on Monday. And for those of you friends up in the Marquette region, I will be up there personally, so I'd love to see you. Thanks, everybody.